Yo, what's good, Shinobi Nation? Welcome back to Just a Shinobi, the home of the craziest Naruto what-ifs. Today we're jumping into part 2 of What If Yajuu Sanin trained neglected Naruto. So strap in, because things are about to get explosive. If you're new to the channel, make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter, and share this video with your whole ninja squad. And of course, drop your theories in the comments. Your support is what keeps this shinobi grinding. Chapter 6: Be Better. The graduation exam for the academy was split up into 5 parts: a written exam, an accuracy test, a taijutsu spar, the academy 3, and a special section to demonstrate any personal abilities that could warrant extra credit. Many of the students from civilian families opted out from this particular section. They mostly felt that any skills that they could demonstrate would be unimpressive when compared to the abilities passed down through clan families. For example, Kiba and Akamaru showed off their tsuga, Hinata demonstrated kata's of the, and Sasuke let loose his clan's signature no jutsu. After the chatter over Sasuke's technique died down, Naruto was finally called up and he could barely contain his excitement. He ran to the center of the courtyard with his bag of sealing materials slung over his shoulder. Iruka and the 2 teachers grading with him felt a sense of dread wash over them as the class prankster approached to demonstrate his individual talent. Alright Naruto, what do you have planned for us today? And please be serious. You know this can go a long way to affect your grade. Don't you worry, Iruka-sensei. I wouldn't mess this up for the sake of a joke. This time, I am going to graduate. I'm ready to show you what I can really do. Iruka gave a confident smile. Alright, and what have you prepared? Naruto knelt and began pulling out scrolls and bottles of ink out of his bag. I'm going to demonstrate some special seals that I made all by myself. My presentation is going to have multiple parts, but I've got the really complicated one already made. I just wanted to show you that I can do the first part by myself before moving on. Iruka was confused, but he still nodded. Alright then, you may begin. Naruto gave him one last smile, before his face changed to one of deep concentration. He dipped his brush into the special ink and began his careful strokes along the scroll. What the hell does that idiot think he's doing? Kiba whispered to Shino, as he watched the blonde scribble away on some scroll. I believe he is attempting to utilize his proficiency in for this segment of the test, Shino replied in his monotone voice. What proficiency? I love Naruto as much as the next guy, but the guy's not too bright. I know he sometimes uses seals for his pranks, but come on. Does he really think he's good enough for it to help him with the test? Considering he is halfway through the intermediate series, one would assume that he knows what he is doing. How the hell do you know that? Shino raised a hand as one of his Kakachu insects crawled up his finger. I send my helpers to observe everyone in the academy. I did it to learn as much as I could about my potential teammates, and keep tabs on them in the event something went awry during the day. Kiba looked shocked for a moment, before grumbling, I swear, if I see anything that even resembles a tick in Akamaru's fur, I'm gonna. Done, Iruka-sensei! Naruto yelled as he wiped his brow, before handing the fruit of his labor over to Iruka. Iruka looked over the scroll pretending to inspect it, when he was really trying to save face in front of the other judges. To be honest, had been a subject that always went over his head. Of course he had the required knowledge needed for someone of rank, but he had never really looked too into it. Alright Naruto. It looks very impressive, but what does it do exactly? Naruto's face lit up with his signature grin as he took back the scroll. I'm happy to show ya, but I'm gonna need you or one of the other teachers to help me with the demonstration. He looked behind Iruka over at the other 2 teachers and asked, do any of you know any jutsu? Mizuki shook his head, curious of what the boy could be planning, but his colleague nodded and handed him his clipboard. As he stepped forward, Naruto instructed him to stand in place as he ran to the other side of the training field. Alright sensei. Fire it at me with all you got. Iruka was instantly worried. Naruto, are you sure about this? Naruto flashed him a smile. Don't you worry, sensei. I got this. He turned his gaze back to the other teacher. Ready whenever you are. They had a hard time suppressing a grin as he began forming hand signs. It wasn't every day the demon child actually asked you to attack it. He mentally smirked as he prepared his one ration jutsu that he had copied from a cloud ninja he had fought last spring. It had definitely been worth all that practice to get to use it now. He didn't know what the demon brat had planned, but this wasn't in B-class jutsu for nothing. It wouldn't kill the brat, but it was certainly going to hurt. Excruciating even. He formed his final tiger seal, before throwing his palms out to his side. The lightning chakra began swirling around his palms and he clapped his palms forward, while screaming, "Right on, Thunderstream!" The thunderbolt raced across the training field almost too fast for Irika to see. While his eyes could follow its path, his body was too slow to respond. He started to scream out towards the blonde, who had his confident smirk plastered on his face the entire time. As the bolt was about to reach him, Naruto whipped open his seal and the bolt slammed into the paper and ink. At first nothing happened, but then the markings on the seal glowed white as the bolt of lightning disappeared in a flash of light. After it died down, the center of the scroll now held the kanji for lightning. Everyone in the courtyard stared at the steaming scroll and tried to comprehend what had just happened. Naruto turned the scroll around, inspected it, and smiled as he looked it over. "Thanks, Sensei. That was perfect." The was dumbfounded. That had been the strongest jutsu he had in his arsenal, and the boy had seemingly brushed it off. "Naruto," Irika said in a quiet voice, "what did you just do?" Naruto ran over and pushed the scroll into his hands. "See this," he said, pointing to the kanji for lightning. "This is the jutsu that Reishi-sensei shot at me. I sealed it into this scroll." Naruto kept talking a mile a minute as he started heading towards one of the training dummies on the other side of the field. There are different sealing techniques that can seal elemental jutsu. You just have to be ready for which type you want to seal. I've always found it easiest to absorb ratio jutsu because it's already in a natural state of energy. As he arrived at the wooden dummy, he began rummaging through his bag. "Since I don't know any jutsu myself, I thought I'd show off with a storage seal before moving on to the main event. Which is AHA. This." He pulled out a piece of paper with a triangular seal marking and slapped it onto the dummy's chest. Racing back to Irika, he took the scroll out of the Chunin's hands. "I have always been bothered by how hard it can be to land some jutsu on faster opponents, so I made this to fix the problem." He faced away from the training dummy and swung the seal forward as he yelled, "Release!" The blue lightning jutsu erupted from the seal and raced across the courtyard away from him. Just as quickly as it left the seal, it arced upward over Naruto's head and raced back toward the dummy. It slammed into the wooden caricature, which erupted in an explosion of splinter, leaving a smoking crater in its place. Turning away from his stunned classmates, he puffed out his chest and stared at Irika. "I present to you the Lighting Rod Seal. Designed to attract any and all traditional jutsu directly to its location. Place it on an enemy shinobi, and any projectile-style jutsu you use is sure to land." Irika's face lit up in a big smile, and he ruffled the boy's hair. "Very good, Naruto. I'm very impressed. You did stupendously." The boy let out a nervous laugh as he scratched the back of his head. He turned and bowed to Reishi-sensei, thanking him for his help. As he headed back to his classmates, Irika made eye contact with Reishi and shot him a fierce glare. That had been a high-class jutsu. If it had hit Naruto dead on, he would have likely been sent to the ICU for third-degree burns. He shuddered to think what would have happened if his seal hadn't worked as planned. His look sent his message loud and clear. The Hokage would absolutely be hearing this. The man scowled before heading back to Mizuku to retrieve his clipboard. Irika wasn't the only person upset about Naruto's performance. Mizuku internally frowned as he reflected Naruto's performance in his tests. He had actually passed his written exam with decent scores, and had even scored highly on his taijutsu and accuracy tests. Even if he failed one of the Academy 3, which he likely would in the Bunshin section, his bonus points from this event would surely propel him just enough to pass. Mizuki had plans for the boy. Plans that had assumed that the boy would be desperate enough to use his close connection to the Hokage to swipe the forbidden scroll. He would have to take measures into his own hands and ensure that the blonde failed. It would be a shame if the boy's written exam was somehow misplaced in the grading process. Who would believe that the dead last had received 84% on his written exam anyways? Naruto sat dejected on the lone swing of the Academy's courtyard as he watched the newly minted genin chatting amongst themselves, ecstatic with their results. It took everything he had to keep in the tears that threatened to fall from his face. Hinata watched unheartbroken, as the Hittite around her neck felt as if weighed a ton. She felt cemented in place as the sinking weight of her headband and the package in her bag reminded her of her crush's failure. She had been in this situation before. Yearning to comfort the blonde as he dejectedly watched the other children laughing amongst themselves, she resolved herself and pushed her shaking leg forward. This was her last chance to help her crush in the time that he needed a friend most. Before she could go anywhere, the blonde took off. The students' parents had started to arrive, and he couldn't stand to see their smiling faces and looks of pride. It was just an all too painful reminder of what he didn't have. Hinata prepared to jump after him, but her personal guide Ko caught her shoulder. "You did well, Hinata-sama. I'm sure Hayashi-sama will be most pleased with your results. You should be proud of yourself." As she watched the retreating form of the orange-clad blonde, she felt anything but proud of herself. She had been too afraid and failed again. Possibly for the last time. She hung her head as she followed Ko back towards the Hyuga compound. On top of the walls of the academy, Mizuki smiled as he watched the retreating form of the blonde boy. It was going to be too easy. Several hours later, night had settled over Konoha, but the town was anything but sleepy. In the woods outside of the village, a boy clad in orange raced away as fast as he could while carrying a rather large scroll on his back. His cheek stung from the cut of a blade that had been way too close for comfort. His mind was still upset when he remembered how he had acquired it. Flashback. Sneaking into the Hokage's office had been easy. Getting into Jim's secret room had been slightly more difficult as he struggled to remember the codes from when Gigi would open the safe in front of him. He had almost been home free until he opened the door, coming face to face with the surprised Hokage flanked by his right-hand man. "Naruto? What a dash!" He was cut off as a cloud of smoke erupted, revealing a scantily clad girl wiggling her hips seductively. The old man stared for a moment, before blood spurted from his nose, rocketing him into the ground. His bodyguard had barely glanced at the naked figure before drawing his tanto and slashing at the figure's head. His henge quickly disappeared as he used every ounce of his speed to evade the cut, and even so, he was still grazed along his cheek. He had quickly slapped a piece of paper onto the ANBU's outstretched arm before disappearing in a flash of yellow light. The ANBU cursed as his arm dragged him to the ground, causing cracks to appear on the floor. "Gravity seal," he cursed as he tried to peel the paper from his arm to no avail. His left hand went through one-handed seals before erupting in bright, white fire. He clasped his hand on the paper and began painfully peeling it from his skin. Ripping up flesh as he went, he cursed at Naruto's stupidity. He didn't know what the blonde was up to or what he was involved with, but he was in for a world of trouble after he found him. Finally removing the seal from his body, he cauterized his wound before turning towards the passed-out Hokage. It would reflect poorly on the esteemed leader if others were to find him in his current state, let alone what caused it. Kitsune sighed as he ran through hand seals to wake the professor up. His eyes darted to the window as he spied a dark form hurrying across rooftops on the other side of the village. His eyes promised a world of pain for whoever was responsible for this mess. End flashback. Naruto wiped his mouth and ignored the feeling of a hole in his stomach as he raced along the treetops. After finding a spot that was a relatively safe distance away from the village, he finally took a moment to catch his breath. He had never moved that fast in his life, and he had never expected Kitsune to actually take a swing at him. The older boy had barely given his Oriole Jutsu a second glance. Seriously, Kitsune was all work and no play. Not one to waste time, Naruto set the scroll down and began poring over its contents. His eyes flashed over advanced katan capable of leveling entire armies and jutsu capable of making blood boil, but he ignored those looking for something that was at least a little manageable for him. Not that he wouldn't love to learn such awesome jutsu like that, but he was on a limited timetable and he didn't want to waste a second on something he couldn't learn immediately. As he scrolled over the contents, his eyes fell across the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Perfect. He was about to begin work on it, but his eyes continued wandering the page until it stopped on the next entry. It was a seal that practically screamed at him. It looked so familiar that Naruto felt his face pale when he finally recognized what it was. While the shape of the formula and key parts were different, it was the jutsu formula for the project he had been working on in private for 3 years. He bit his lip as he looked between the 2 gold mines that he had discovered. Here was a treasure trove of information that could potentially finally help him master his secret technique without all of the negative side effects, but Naruto wasn't stupid. It had taken him 3 years to get where he was with the technique, and Mizuki-sensei said he had to master one by the end of the night. Making up his mind, he pulled out a scroll and ink as he began making a copy seal to record all of the information regarding his project. As he was about to place it on top of the scroll, he faltered. He quickly unfurled the entire scroll and skimmed his eyes across the bottom of the page, and a wave of relief swam over him as he did. Always check for an anti-theft seal. If he had placed the copy seal, all of the contents of the forbidden scroll would have been wiped clean, and he knew Gigi would have been furious if that happened. Slightly altering the contents of his copy seal, he held it over the section regarding the teleportation technique and poured chakra into his scroll. With a flash of light, a copy image was now safely within his own scroll. Photo seal complete. Ensuring that it was safely secure in his bag, he returned his attention back to the Kage Bunshin and got to work. I want every available off-duty jounin out there searching for Naruto. We cannot allow that scroll to be lost or stolen. Am I understood? Yes, sir! An echoed cry responded to the Hokage. The old man was deeply concerned as he could only wait for one of his subordinates to return with some news. As soon as the Kage had regained consciousness, Kitsune had sped off in pursuit of the orange-clad boy. His aura promised a world of pain. Of course, Hiruzen was worried about the boy's well-being, but the leader side of him was more concerned about the contents of the scroll. It would be a disaster if a scroll listing many of the Nidame's forbidden jutsu were to fall into enemy hands. Especially when the scroll contained 2 jutsu that the professor considered as the most deadly in all of Konoha's records. The Hiraishin and Edo Tensei were 2 of the deadliest jutsu ever created, and the details of how to perform them now were in the hands of an impulsive young boy being led into some kind of trap. Hours later. It had taken him some time, but he had finally caught on to the boy's scent. About 5 minutes ago, he had been following a barely noticeable track, until the boy's chakra signature lit up like a flare in the sky. When he finally arrived in the clearing, he came across the young boy in the deep embrace of Irika Yumino, sobbing with happiness into his flak jacket. He noted the lack of A8 on the older boy's forehead and put 2 and 2 together. He glanced over at the twitching form of the other academy instructor, Mizuki. The man was beaten to a pulp and required medical attention, but he would certainly live. Kitsune sniffed at the air. It was heavy with the distinctive smell that a Kage Bunshin's cloud created. Piecing the picture together, Kitsune dropped to the floor and hung the forbidden scroll across his back. After the target was secure, he began making his way towards the duo. Naruto smiled and ran up to him, only to be met with a forceful open palm to the throat. Ignoring the boy's sputtering and spasms of pain, he knelt before the still leaning against the tree. You are injured, Irika-san. Do you require immediate medical attention? The man shook his head as he leaned forward, showing his injury. Windmill shuriken to my back, but it managed to miss my spine. The flak jacket absorbed most of the damage. Kitsune nodded and began helping the man to his feet. He then turned his attention back to the boy who had finally regained his ability to speak. The blond boy was about to speak up when he was met with an icy glare and a more than uncomfortable amount of killing intent. And just what did you think you were doing? But Mizuki-team said. I realize what happened. I can piece the picture together. What I can't understand is how you could be so stupid as to not realize that something was wrong. Did you not think that it was somewhat suspicious to steal one of the most heavily guarded scrolls in all of Konoha? Or did you not think something was wrong when I decided to attack you? The blond boy took a step back under the heavy scrutiny. I get that you're mad, but... I'm not mad, the older boy cut him off. I'm disappointed. This shut the boy up as he held his head down in shame. I'm sorry, he whispered. Don't be sorry. Be smarter. A few seconds went by, before the blonde felt the familiar touch of the older boy's hand on his head. He looked up and met the older boy's eyes. He noticed that their coldness had faded away. I expect more from a fellow shinobi of the leaf, he said as he tapped the forehead protector on top of Naruto's head. The boy was shocked as more tears threatened to fall from his face. He held his head high and vigorously nodded. Good. Now that this mess is cleared up, let us return to the Hokage. He took the scroll off his back and handed it to the young boy. Are you sure I can trust you with this? The blonde beamed and secured the scroll to his back as the ANBU agent picked up the beaten form of Mizuki. Then let's be on our way. Days later. Sandaime sat in his office puffing away at this pipe, glad that the previous day's events had finally blown over. The suspect had been apprehended, the scroll had been returned, and the boy had even learned a highly advanced jutsu for his trouble. Of course, he had received a rather scathing lecture once he had returned, but, in the end, he had let Irika's decision stand. If it hadn't been for Mizuki's meddling, he was sure Naruto would have passed the graduation without a problem. This, however, created two problems. The boy finally knew his dark secret, or one of them at least. He had been worried about the boy's reaction to hearing such world-crushing news, but the boy had bounced back as determined as ever. It wasn't every day that you found out why the entire civilian population of the village decided to hate you. His reaction had been a testament of the boy's resolve and of his bond with his teacher. He made sure to remember to give Irika a slight bump in his paycheck in the upcoming weeks. The other issue regarded the selection of teams for the new batch of genin. With Naruto now added to the mix, he would have to rearrange the team selections. He had originally considered the possibility of throwing Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura together to form the standard dead last with Rookie and Kunoichi of the Year combination, but eventually tossed that idea out the window. While he was very impressed with Sakura's intelligence, he found her actual skill level lacking for one labeled as the Academy's top Kunoichi. After much debate, he decided to shift her over to Team 8 with Kurenai Yuhi. The woman would serve as a fine role model for the young girl. She would be sure to knock any whimsical ideas out of the little girl's head and mold her into a fine soldier. With Kurenai as her teacher and her impeccable chakra control, he was sure that she had the potential to turn into a truly talented genjutsu specialist. As he looked over the new roster one last time, he could not help but smile as the latest iteration of Team 7 reminded him of the previous incarnation that had served under Jiraiya. Those piercing black and white eyes paired with that signature blonde hair brought back both wonderful and painful memories of the trio, each of whom left a permanent mark on the history of the village. He signed off on his last decision of the night before finally deciding to head to bed. The stack of paperwork for tomorrow would surely be there when he returned. Across the village, Naruto lay on his bed staring up at the headband in his hands. He had done it. He was finally a shinobi. Yet he still felt like he hadn't deserved it, no matter what Irika reassured him. He didn't care what Mizuki did. Sure, he may have altered his scores, but he had still fallen for his ploy like a desperate child. Yet the Sandaime had still approved Irika's decision and let him be a shinobi, even after falling for such an obvious and stupid trap. He was going to make it up to the old man for all of the trouble, and not just by being the best damn shinobi he could. Maybe he could do something to lighten up his work schedule. Just another thing to add to the back burner. Speaking of his projects, he double-checked to ensure that his security seals were in place before he ducked his head under his bed. He rummaged inside his bag and pulled out the scroll he had been careful to hide from the Hokage. Gigi already knew he could perform the other technique, so he wouldn't mind if he made a copy of the other one, right? Even though guilt racked through his body, Naruto opened up the scroll to the jutsu that he finally had a name to, the Hiraishin no Jutsu. Whoever named the thing certainly had an air for the theatric. Flying Thunder God Jutsu indeed. All in all, he was extremely lucky that the jutsu did not require hand signs, or else he may have never figured it out. It would have been impossible to solve the problem with only half the information. The more he looked between the seal from the scroll and the seal on the kunai, the more he could tell that they had been developed by two different people. The bulk of the schematics were the same, but there were several minor improvements in the version from the kunai. Theatrical or not, whoever redesigned the seal was a genius. The overall shape of the seal had been completely overhauled and shaped to fit inside the kanji of endurance, love, and sword. Why it was designed that way, he hadn't the faintest idea, but he was ready to find out. He was getting ready to jot down some new notes when there was a rapid knock on his door. Who could it possibly have been at this hour? It was nearly 10:30. He opened the door to find nothing but air staring back at him. He glanced up and down the street, but found no one around. Despite the apparent bareness, he could still feel a lingering gaze bearing straight at him. He looked down and was surprised to find a nicely wrapped orange box with a blue ribbon sitting on his doorstep. He picked up the note on top and opened it. It was a nice little note written with elegant handwriting. It was short and to the point, but carried weight behind its few words. Congratulations on graduating. I'm so happy you were able to pass. Good luck, and I'm sure you will become a splendid shinobi. He felt his breath hitch as he picked up the box. Over the years, he had received mysterious gifts around his birthday from some unknown person. One year he had received his beloved frog wallet, and the next he had received his beloved goggles. He had always assumed it was Gigi, but the boy had spent enough time in his office to know that this wasn't his handwriting. He gave one last look from his doorway, noticing a small shadow hiding behind an air conditioning unit 2 buildings away. "Whoever you are, thank you so much for everything," he shouted. He noticed the shadow fall deeper into the darkness of the roof, before a neighbor across the street opened his window and started shouting. "Shut up, you damn brat! Some of us are trying to sleep." The boy's face crunched up in a similar frown. "Shut up, Tsubiki team. I'll do what I want." With that, he headed inside and slammed the door behind him. The shadow could not help but giggle by the boy's antics as it started making its way back home. In the words of one of its classmates, it would be quite troublesome if it was discovered that they were absent this late at night. Chapter 7, The Test Part 1. Naruto woke up as a nasty jolt of chakra burst through his system. He groaned and wanted to return to the sweet embrace of sleep, but he knew that he'd just receive a nastier jolt in another 5 minutes. Deciding it was time to get up, he lifted up his shirt and peeled the seal off of his chest. Another useful trick he had learned from his books. Shinobi had long ago realized it was much more cost-effective to design a new seal than to keep wasting money on alarm clocks. Their instincts were so jumpy that they kept driving Kanai into their alarm clocks as they went off. He pulled himself out of bed and groggily meandered over to the kitchen. He reached into his cabinet and started heating up a pot of water, before heading off towards the bathroom. As he let the shower warm up, he stared at his shirtless form in the mirror. After a minute of silence, he began focusing on the chakra and stared at the dark insignia that appeared over his stomach. So this was it. This was the source of every bad thing that had ever happened in his life. The source of all his pain, all his anguish, all his loneliness. Even as these bitter thoughts raced through his mind, his analytical side couldn't help but be amazed by Yandame's work. The fourth really had been a genius. This wasn't just an efficient seal, this was art. Naruto could only recognize the double elephant seal, but he had no idea what the others meant. This was the step beyond the advanced class. A point that he only dreamed of reaching. He had initially held some resentment for Yandame's actions, but he found that he couldn't stay mad at his idol. The man had to make the difficult decision and had apparently made the ultimate sacrifice in the process. If the fourth really thought he was up to the task, he was going to be sure to prove it to him. Besides, if those close to him saw him for who he truly was, what else really mattered? Newly invigorated, he tentatively entered the hot shower as a new train of thought re-entered his mind. It had been nagging at him all night. Who could have possibly delivered that thoughtful gift? He had already ruled out Nei-chan. It wasn't her style. She preferred to be loud, upfront, and commanded your attention. Certainly not Kitsune. While quiet, he would be frank and deliver anything in person, not hiding away in the dark. Besides, he had told him he would not give him another gift until he had mastered the previous gift from his last birthday. No one else came to mind as he dried himself off and headed towards his closet. He opened it, and a sea of white and orange stared back at him. He had tried to shake things up with this awesome orange jumpsuit he had found a few months ago, but Kitsune had given it one look before slicing it in half, warning him to never wear it again. So he had stuck with his orange hoodies, until today, that is. He reached into the back of the closet and pulled out the gift he had received from the previous night. As he stared at himself in the mirror, he felt something was missing. He snapped his fingers and raced over to his nightstand. He pulled his signature goggles over his neck and tightened his hitai around his forehead, before returning to the mirror. There we go! He beamed as he admired his new look. Whoever had picked it out for him certainly had style. His eyes gazed over the clock and he was pleased to note he still had plenty of time. He strolled back into the kitchen, poured the hot water into his cup of ramen, and began his stroll out towards the academy. By this time, Hinata had already woken up and was getting dressed as well. She had just finished combing her hair, and was leaving her bathroom. As she opened the door, her gaze hardened as she stared holes through the tiny scroll sitting on her desk. The day after the incident in the library, she had woken up with the small scroll clenched firmly in her hands. She had no recollection of how she had acquired it, and when she asked her father about it, he claimed to have no knowledge of any scroll. The first time she opened it, she had felt the same feeling that the horned figure had given off in the room. Of course, she immediately wanted to be rid of it. However, no matter how many times she tried, the thing kept coming back in perfect condition. She had originally thrown it out of her window, only to find it later that night on her desk. Not one to give up, she had buried, burned, and ripped it apart, but it always kept reappearing fully intact later that day. It disturbed her to no end. It was like some cursed object she couldn't rid herself of. When she tried to show her father, his eyes seemed to fog up and he would act as if he had no idea what she was talking about. It was supernatural, and she did not like it. What truly irritated her was whatever the scroll was trying to tell her, it was doing a poor job of it. No matter what she did, the scroll remained blank. She had tried to read it when she was alone, with the, and even back in that accursed room. Every time, it remained as blank as the day she opened it. She shot it one last glare before picking up her kunai pouch and left the room. As she walked out, she bumped into the Hyuga's clan's little ball of fire. "Good morning, Nei-chan." While Hanabi was as serious as her father during spars, the moment she stepped out of the dojo, she was a bustling little firecracker of energy. "So," she drawled, leaning in towards her sister, "did you deliver your gift last night?" Hinata's face flushed crimson as she nervously began tapping her fingers. "I don't know what you're talking about." Hanabi held her cocky smile, as she placed her hands on her hips. "You can't lie to me, Nei-chan. You may have told Ko you were just out training, but I saw what direction you were heading. Right towards Na." Hinata slapped her hand over Hanabi's mouth as her head whipped back and forth to make sure they were alone. "Please don't talk about that here," she pleaded. The young girl rolled her eyes. Literally everyone knew about Hinata's crush. She didn't understand why the need to keep it so hush-hush. Apparently the only ones still oblivious to the fact were her father and the blonde boy in question. "Got it, Nei-chan," she said after Hinata removed her hand. "Well, I just wanted to wish you good luck with your team assignments." She held her hand to her forehead in a mocking gesture. "Who knows, maybe you will be paired off with that dashing Naruto-kun. It will be like a dream come true." Hinata shot her sister with her patented side eye, clearly not amused by her joke. She still gave her a short hug before she made her way out of the house. Hanabi sighed as she watched her sister go. Her handler always tried to persuade her that she was the stronger of the two sisters, but she wouldn't hear any of it. She admired her sister's fierce determination, and no matter what father said, Hinata was a stronger kunoichi than she would ever be. While she had been teasing, she really did hope that Hinata was placed on the same team as her crush. It would do her some good by forcing her into his presence, for everyone knew she would never make the first move herself. Shaking her head, she headed off towards the kitchen, hoping to sneak off with a cinnamon roll before she had her morning katas. Sasuke paused as he entered the mostly empty classroom to see the blonde boy dozing off in the front row. He just didn't know when to quit. Even after failing for the third time, he still had the gall to show up at the graduation ceremony. He passed him without a word as he claimed his seat in the second row next to the window. Over time, more and more of his classmates trickled in, each shooting the blonde the same confused look. Finally, Shikamaru arrived and paused in front of the blonde. He tapped his knuckles on top of the boy's head, waking him up. "Naruto, don't you think this is getting a little sad? This is for graduates only, not dropouts." Sure, it was harsh, but it was time for the blonde to start facing reality. The boy yawned before erupting in a smile and tapping at his own hittite. "I know it's for graduates. That's why I'm here." "Well, what do you know? You actually did it." The pineapple-haired boy fought a smile from forming on his face. "You know it," the blonde beamed. Shikamaru shook his head, noticing the blonde's new clothes, before muttering troublesome and walking up the stairs to take his seat next to Chuji. Hinata had blushed when she had seen the boy already dressed in the clothes she had left for him. She was happy to know that the blonde liked her gift. She had given him a gray long-sleeve shirt and navy short-sleeve hoodie along with 2 pairs of pants. One dark orange and one gray. She thought he looked quite handsome, and tried to stop a blush from creeping up her face. After several minutes, Iruka finally walked into the room and took his place in front of the class. "I want you all to know just how proud I am of all of you. Your hard work has finally paid off and now you are all official shinobi of the Leaf. Now remember, the teams that each of you will be split up into will be like your family. More than likely, You will be working with these people for the rest of your life. However, the life of a ninja is never a certain one. Make sure to treasure every moment with your teammates, since you never know when they might be gone. He paused, as he made sure everyone let the message sink in. Sorry to end on that sour note, you guys, but now let's move on to what you're all waiting for. Your team assignments. Everyone sat up as Irika began rattling off the names. An eerie quietness settled over the room, only broken by the whispers of the groups whose names had been called. That was until Team 7, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto lifted his head at the sound of his name. Hinata Hyuga. A sharp intake of breath was heard from the back of the class. And Sasuke Uchiha. In a flash, all of the girls in the room let out a loud groan as none of them were placed with their precious Sasuke-kun. They all shot glares at Hinata, who eeped and tried to bury herself in her jacket. Now Team 8, Sakura Haruno. She came out of her funk and paid him her direct attention. Kiba Inuzuka. The boy chuckled as the pink-haired girl let out a sigh. And Shino Aburame. The said boy merely adjusted his glasses. The pink-haired girl looked dejected and uncomfortable with her new teammates. Take that forehead, girl, Ino thought triumphantly, before a wave of realization rolled over her. Wait, but that means… Irika cleared his throat before he continued. Team 10 will be as follows: Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and Chuji Akimichi. It was Ino's turn to look crestfallen as Sakura shot her a triumphant look, seeming much more pleased with her own teammates. These are all of the team assignments. All I can offer you now is the best of luck. I'm sure you will all make me proud, so good luck in your career as a shinobi. He's late, the blonde whined as the second hour passed by. He tapped his foot vigorously and every once in a while stuck his head out into the hallway, hoping for a glimpse of their sensei. Hinata and Sasuke sat at their desks and offered their silent agreements with the boys' complaints. At first Hinata had felt that she was on cloud 9. It had actually happened. She had another chance to make it up to him the other day. Guilt still racked her mind, as she had once again been too scared and nervous to approach the boy in a time of need. She didn't know the full details how the blonde had finally been allowed to graduate, but she was now determined to make it up to him. Naruto-kun, please be patient. I'm certain there is a reason our sensei is late, Hinata said, trying to defuse the situation. The blonde pouted and Sasuke ignored his next round of complaining. His thoughts were preoccupied by how the hell the dun had done it. Sasuke was sure that Naruto had failed. He had seen him sitting dejectedly on the swing as he left the academy. So how he was here now, suddenly allowed to graduate? It made no sense to him. He supposed the Hokage finally needed a good sealing expert, and just let the blonde pass just to get him into the system. He was brought out of his musing as Naruto grabbed an eraser and chair. He wedged the eraser between the doorframe and the door, as he chuckled at his own ingenuity. Naruto-kun, what are you doing? Hinata asked, moving from her desk for a better view. That's what he gets for being late, he replied triumphantly, moving the chair back to Irika's desk. At that moment, a certain spiky-haired jounin stood outside. He eyed the piece of chalk in the doorframe and shrugged before opening the door. Let them have some fun before he crushed their dreams. So the four of them found themselves sitting on the roof staring with anticipation at the silver-haired jounin who stared right back. He had asked them to name off their likes, dislikes, and dreams for the future, while avoiding answering the same questions. He motioned Naruto to go first. He puffed out his chest before declaring, "My name is Naruto Uzumaki. My hobbies are ramen, reading, creating new seals, my Jiji, Nechan, and Kitsun Baka too, I guess. My dislikes are people who put down others and tardy teachers, eyeing Kakashi who simply shot him one of his eye smiles. My dreams are to one day become Konoha's next seal master and the greatest of all time. Databeo." Kakashi only nodded as he turned his attention to the Hyuga heiress. "Gomen. My name is Hinata Hyuga. My likes also include reading, as well as flower pressing, and my family. My dislikes." Her thoughts trailed off as she thought about the divide in amongst the Hyuga. "Are rather personal to my clan. And my dreams are," she blushes as she shoots Naruto a quick glance, before holding her head high, "to unify my clan and become the next clan leader." Kakashi gave her a nod, before turning to the last member of the team. Sasuke curtly replied, "I don't really have a lot of things I like, but plenty of things I dislike. I don't really have a dream, but rather a goal. I am going to restore my clan, and kill a certain man." Naruto and Hinata felt uncomfortable as the atmosphere had taken a much more somber tone. Kakashi seized the opportunity to explain to them the survival exercise they'd be having. No matter how many genin teams he had failed over the years, he never got over the hilarity of their shocked expressions. The next day, Kakashi felt as if he was looking into a mirror of the past as he watched his latest team interact. Like he himself had done, Sasuke was leaning against the bridge, ignoring all attempts at communication from the other two. Hinata was quiet and calm, just as Rin had been, and acted as the mediator between the two boys, although it was painfully obvious that she favored the blonde. Naruto was talking a mile a minute, while Hinata tried her best not to faint from the boys' close proximity. It was like seeing two people in one, as Naruto painfully reminded him of both his late sensei and Uchiha teammate. He even had goggles just as Obito had. Kakashi sighed. He'd probably have to pass this team too. The backlash from the civilian council and Hyuga clan would be a pain in the ass if he were to fail the Uchiha and Hyuga heirs. He also felt that he had an obligation to his sensei to ensure that his son received proper training. However, he had his own code, and he was going to stick to it. If these students weren't able to determine the true meaning of the test, he would fail all of them. Perhaps he would take Naruto under his wing, but he would probably have to fight Kitsune over him. But he was getting ahead of himself. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his trademark orange book and leaned back against the tree he was hiding in. Wouldn't want to make them think that he could actually arrive on time. The breeze whipped through the training grounds, causing Naruto to stop and sniff at the air. He scowled as he started scanning the tree line. Hinata noticed this and asked, "What is Naruto-kun?" He shook his head as he said, "I could have sworn I just smelled Kakashi-sensei, but I don't see him anywhere." He was surprised when he saw veins starting to bulge around Hinata's eyes as she scanned around the field. She stopped and turned toward the direction Naruto had previously pointed to. "He's over there sitting in that tree." "What is he doing?" Sasuke piped in, curious what could possibly hold up their sensei. "He seems to just be sitting and reading," she replied. A tick mark formed on Naruto's head as he screamed, "Hey you Baka-sensei! Stop wasting our time reading your stupid books." A second later the spiky-haired appeared in a swirl of leaves saying, "Yo. You're late." Naruto's scream echoed across the training ground. "Nope. I've been here the whole time waiting for you to find me, and I got to say I'm a little disappointed." Even Sasuke sat up at this comment. "You never said anything about finding you," Naruto balked. "True, but you all haven't utilized any of this free time to do anything productive. All this time and you guys have just wasted it waiting around. Did it not occur to you to stretch or warm up before I got here? Maybe make some plans for the test?" Even Sasuke looked away as the thought had not occurred to any of them. Kakashi sighed as he motioned for them to follow. As he reached a set of training posts, he reached into his bag and pulled out an alarm clock. It was time for the bell test to commence. A shinobi must be able to conceal their movements and hide efficiently. This lesson was engraved into every student in the academy. That class was covered more thoroughly than any of the other practical classes, such as throwing kunai and shuriken. The class had a midterm assignment of sneaking from one side of Konoha to the other without being spotted by the planted shinobi hiding among the civilians. Many students were eventually caught due to being careless or reckless. But not Sasuke and Hinata. Kakashi could still sense their chakra, but he couldn't see them at all. The fruits of their efforts were evident. Naruto, however, had decided to ignore that class apparently. The blonde boy appeared in a blur in front of Kakashi. The boy reminded him so much of his sensei, especially in that outfit. "You know, compared to the others, you're not very bright. Why bother hiding? You're a jounin. No matter how well we conceal ourselves, you'd be able to find us no sweat." Now. You might be overestimating my capabilities a little, don't you think?" The blonde vigorously shook his head. "Nope, Kitsune-san can find me anywhere, even when he's not trying. Even if you say you're a jounin, I'm certain your tracking skills are up to par with him." "Inu," the blonde finished with a mischievous grin. If Kakashi was surprised, he didn't show it. The blonde continued, "By the way, I wanted to thank you for stopping those villagers 6 years ago. It meant a lot to me." Kakashi waved him off. "Think nothing of it. It was the least I could do. Now, If you are finished moping about in the past, he began reaching into his pouch, putting Naruto immediately at alert. Shinobi Battle Tactics, Part 1, Kakashi said, sounding like a textbook. Taijutsu, the physical part. Taijutsu? Then why is he reaching for his pouch? Naruto wondered as he prepared to snatch a kunai to defend himself. He was caught off foot as his sensei pulled out a familiar orange book. What are you? Naruto asked, confused. You can start whenever you feel like it, the jounin said as he flipped a page. Why are you reading that perverted book? Why? The silver-haired man asked. To find out what happens in the story, obviously. Don't worry, I'm sure your weak attacks won't be enough to actually harm me. Steam blowing out of his ears, the blonde rushed at the older man, throwing out a punch with as much strength as he could muster. He was bothered when the man caught it without even looking. The boy landed and threw a quick kick, which was just as easily blocked. The boy began a flurry of kicks and punches, all of which were effortlessly stopped by the older man. He's fast, Kakashi noted to himself, but extremely sloppy. He had heard negative things from the academy, but this was ridiculous. It was like the boy was incorporating different moves from a multitude of styles that meshed together in an unholy mess. He delivered a powerful kick to the blonde boy's gut, which sent him skidding back several feet. The boy rose to his feet and angrily formed his hands together in the tiger seal, and 10 shadow clones puffed into existence beside him. Many dipped into their pouches, drawing kunai, and charged as one. Kakashi barely moved an inch as he dismantled every clone that attempted to get near him. As he blocked one kick, he noted the original standing in the back watching the events unfold. So the loud brat actually knew how to use his head. He brought his thoughts to a close as he dismembered the last of the clones. He closed his book, and the two seemed to just stare at each other. After a minute, the blonde brought his hands in another seal, summoning more clones. Kakashi was a little disappointed. He had been told that the blonde was quite imaginative. You can't just beat me with clones. At this rate, you'll never get a bell. The blonde chose to ignore the man's taunt and reached into his bag. Quickly, he threw down a smoke grenade, engulfing the area in purple smoke. Kakashi stayed put as he heard the clones beginning to surround him. He was about to reach for some shuriken to dispel them, when a pair of hands shot out of the ground and clasped onto his feet. Immediately, the clones charged as one. Using his superior strength, Kakashi wrenched himself free of the hand underground and jumped into the air, hearing the satisfying pops of the clones after he let loose his barrage of shuriken. As he soared out of the cloud of gas, he saw the original Naruto going through several hand seals. Even without his Sharingan, he recognized that jutsu and actually began to worry. What was Kitsune doing teaching that jutsu to an academy student? Naruto brought a hand to his lips as he exclaimed, "Katan, Fox Hellfire!" A stream of spiking, yellow fire streaked from the mouth. It surged forward and engulfed Kakashi's body, setting him ablaze instantly. Cutting off the jutsu, Naruto found a burning log in the place of his sensei. Kyuso! Kakashi watched the boy from the tree lean as he desperately tried to find his teacher. At least Kitsune had been smart enough to make sure the blonde mastered the jutsu in parts. It may function as a simple katan jutsu in its base form, but its second or third level were no laughing matter. As the boy let out another curse, Kakashi smiled under his mask. So the prankster has a temper problem? This thought brought a smirk to his face as an idea popped into his head. He quickly set up a double-layered snare trap using a bell as the bait. The sunlight reflected off the bell caused the boy to stop. He immediately lit up and ran towards the bell only to stop a foot away. Kakashi frowned as the boy hesitated. Then he placed his foot a few inches away from its previous path and scooped up the bell. Nice try, sensei, but you have to wake up real early to trick the number one prankster in Konoha. Kakashi dropped from the tree and studied the blonde. Once again, the boy was proving that as brash as he usually was, he could think outside the box and think clearly when he needed to. But he couldn't just let the blonde pass due to his own error. Very good, Naruto. I'll certainly remember that next time. Alright, well, I'll just keep this then. The blonde closed his eyes as he smiled. This instant was all the jounin needed. Keep what? Kakashi asked curiously. The bell of Kur. The blonde was shocked to find nothing in his hand. He began frantically checking the ground. Oh, do you mean this bell? Kakashi asked as he held up the lost item. What? How? When did you give that back? I think I'll pass. You have to take the bell from me, not pick it up off the ground. Anger etched itself across his face, as he yelled, Fine then. Time to pull out all the stops. He clasped his hands together and more clones burst into existence. Kakashi sighed, but the boy formed another hand sign and something was immediately wrong. The ground beneath his feet collapsed into a crater, and he was finding it incredibly difficult to move his body. A gravity seal. When did he? Of course, when the clone burst out of the ground to hold me in place. He already had a plan ready in case that one failed. The group of blondes jumped on top of him and pinned him down as the original whipped out a handful of kunai and flung them at the heap of bodies. Kakashi wasn't a jounin for nothing. Even under the influence of the gravity seal, he was still able to use his incredible strength to wrench one of the blondes off him and fling him into the path of most of the kunai coming towards him. He twisted his way out of the paths of the remaining kunai, ensuring that the clones attached to him would fall in their line of fire. Something vaguely familiar passed by his head as he turned his attention to the original, and everything seemed to stop. He watched awestruck as the blonde disappeared in a flash of yellow light that he had seen 100 times. He felt the presence behind and turned to meet a painful punch to his jaw. The blonde reared back for another blow, but bent over clutching his stomach. If he had eaten earlier, any and all contents of his stomach would have been vacated. Instead, he proceeded to throw up an unhealthy amount of blood. Still awestruck, Kakashi ripped off the seal with a mild katon pilot jutsu as he rubbed his jaw. That had actually hurt. More importantly, the blonde was more and more reminding him of the ghost of his past. That had been the Hiraishin no Jutsu, no doubt about it. He really was the budding prodigy the Hokage had boasted him to be. Naruto squatted hugging his stomach as he tried to orient himself. I feel awful. You're about to feel a lot worse, a chilling voice said behind him. Naruto could barely register the words before a blinding pain erupted from his ass as Kakashi shouted, Konoha Secret Finger Jutsu, 1,000 years of death. The boy was sent skyrocketing into the air, heading deep into the woods before a satisfying thud was heard from the clearing. Kakashi barely had time to think as a shuriken whipped past his face. This team was just full of surprises. It was time to see if Sasuke's performance could live up to Naruto's stellar showing. Chapter 8 The Test Part 2. Hinata raced through the woods heading towards where Naruto had impacted. She had found him easily enough with her, but Kakashi-sensei had really sent him flying. It took her at least 7 minutes to reach Naruto's location, and she didn't like what she saw when she arrived. Naruto had apparently crashed headfirst through a thick branch and was now passed out on the forest floor. On his way down, the branches had torn up his face, and now it was covered in some nasty scratches. She turned him over and carefully dragged him so that he was leaning against a tree. She didn't know what caused him to vomit so intensively after that technique, but she didn't want him choking if he had a repeat episode. She reached into her pouch and took out her special ointment that she had made herself and started working on fixing his cuts. As she worked on the blonde, dabbing the cream on his scratches, Kakashi could not help but be impressed. He stalked the pair from the treetops as his clone finished up with Sasuke. He couldn't help but be surprised by her medical knowledge. He was pleased to note that all traces of her shyness seemed to evaporate as she worked. She reminded him of a doctor working in an operating room. No emotions clouding your judgment, and just focusing on your goal. Time to see if those Hyuga eyes were as good at detecting genjutsu as the clan claimed. Kakashi began to cast a light genjutsu with the intention of making it seem like Naruto's state was deteriorating, but the moment the jutsu started to seep into her system, she whipped around and noticed him immediately. Even without the active, she still saw right through his genjutsu. He cut the jutsu short and just stared back at the girl. Now that took some serious chakra control and mental discipline. He was actually starting to like this girl. He dropped to the ground in front of them as Hinata took up a defensive stance over Naruto. That's some very efficient cream. Those scratches already look like they're healing. Any chance you're willing to tell me where you got it? I made it myself from herbs found within the Hyuga estate. Kakashi noted how her stance did not waver, despite her cordial tone. Really? Very impressive. Now then, what are you going to do? There isn't much time left, and you're the only one who hasn't attempted to obtain the bells. She bit her lip as she glanced between the jounin and the boy behind her. There was no way she was going to be able to protect him as well as try to get the bells. She was no fool. She knew she had no chance by herself. She needed help. She quickly flung a kunai at Kakashi before slamming a smoke grenade into the ground. He didn't even move his feet as he batted the kunai away, keeping his eye on the smoke. After the cloud settled, he wasn't too surprised that Hinata and Naruto were gone. At least she understood the point of the exercise, Kakashi thought to himself, but that isn't enough. All three of them have to work together if they want to succeed. Hinata raced towards Sasuke's chakra with Naruto's limp form on her back. With Naruto out cold, she was going to need the Uchiha's help if any of them were going to pass. As she entered the clearing, she was startled to find Sasuke's head sticking out of the ground. He shot her a glare as a blush erupted across his cheeks. Not a word, he muttered, clearly embarrassed by his helpless situation. She gave him a nod, and carefully set Naruto, before helping him dig himself out. Around this time, Naruto was finally beginning to stir, and when he did, he was met with a massive headache. "Ugh, what hit me?" he said as he tried to regain his bearings. His eyes were blurry and he blinked a few times before his vision finally came back into focus on the sight of Sasuke's head. He took one look, before bursting out laughing and falling on his back. Sasuke's face burned crimson in anger and embarrassment. "Shut up, dumbass!" "Oh my lord. This is priceless!" The blonde rolled on the ground clutching his sides, as Sasuke finally climbed free from his trap. He gave Hinata a thankful nod as he began brushing off his clothes. Excuse me, you two," Hinata interjected. She felt her face heating up as both boys turned their attention to her. Why had this been so much easier a minute ago? "I don't think any of us are going to be able to get a bell from Kakashi-sensei on our own." "Speak for yourself," the Uchiha cut in. "I'm going off to find that man and take that bell." "Hey," Naruto yelled, grabbing the retreating boy's shoulder, forcing him to face him. "That was rude. Apologize to Hinata-chan." "Let go of me. I don't want either of your help, nor do I need it." "You can't do everything yourself, you jackass. Stop being so stubborn and just hear her out." "And I just said I don't want your help." "Why, you little—" Their argument was broken off as the sound of the alarm clock pierced across the training grounds. Time was up. "Oh, Hinata?" A familiar voice called sweetly from a tree near the training posts. Looking up, the genin saw their sensei lazily leaning against the tree trunk. "Yes, sensei," she muttered nervously. She did not like where this was going. "Did you try to get a bell?" he asked Fartsu casually. Hinata took a step back. "And no, sensei." "Well, you know what that means, right?" Hinata could only hang her head in shame as she accepted her fate. Kakashi had been more than a little disappointed by the results. There was no denying that these kids were talented. Skill-wise, they earned their genin ranking with flying colors, and maybe could even put a few to shame. As he went over the concept of the survival exercise, he could not help but notice the feelings of guilt that spread across the boys' faces. If they had tried together to get the bells, he was certain that they would at least be able to get one of them. "Alright, I'm going to give you guys one last chance." He left clear instructions to not feed Hinata for her failure to even attempt to obtain a bell, before disappearing with a shunshin. He now watched the pair eating quietly as the young girl's stomach growled, causing her to turn red in embarrassment. As if planned together, both boys offered their lunches at once. The three genin stared at each other in shock before Hinata shook her head. "Please do not waste your opportunity on me." "Too bad, Hinata-chan. I have to make it up to you to patch me up after I land on my head." "I also owe you an apology," Sasuke said as he offered her his food. "You were the only one who saw the true meaning of this test. With all of us at our full strength, I'm confident we can get the bells from Kakashi." The blonde vigorously nodded his head in agreement, as tears threatened to fall down the young girl's face. Kakashi smiled behind his mask. "They finally got it." "Come on, sensei! Let us go!" Naruto yelled as he struggled against the rope. "Sorry. You and Sasuke admitted yourselves that Hinata was the only one who saw through the true meaning of the test. Meaning that you two are the ones who failed. If you want to get free, do it yourself." The blonde and black-haired boys were now tied up against the training posts as Hinata and Kakashi stood over them, Alright then, we'll meet back here tomorrow for our first real day of training. As he turned to leave, he gave one last look to Hinata. I know I just gave that whole speech about abandoning comrades, but tried to overlook that right now. Don't help them get free. They'll never learn if you keep picking up the slack. She blushed at the compliment, as the jounin disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Hinata turned and bowed to the two boys, with a light smile on her face. Gomen, Naruto-kun, Sasuke-kun. But it appears I am less than trash. With that she turned and left, barely controlling her giggling. Hinata-chan. Please! Don't leave us! It was another grueling 15 minutes before Sasuke finally freed himself from his bindings. Great job, Sasuke team. Now let me out! The blonde pleaded. Sasuke smirked and dropped his kunai just out of reach of Naruto's feet. A good shinobi should be able to escape from this himself. He strolled away as the blonde yelled at him with a plethora of curses. After a painstaking hour, Naruto was finally able to wriggle a kunai out of his pouch and cut himself free. Yada! He shouted into the air. He was about to head home, when he remembered he was about to forget something. He froze at the realization and frantically started searching the field, wondering where he could have dropped it. Panic was starting to overtake him when a cool voice behind him called out, "Looking for this?" He spun around to find Kakashi dangling his special kunai from his finger. Naruto couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Thank you, Kakashi-sensei. I don't know what I would have done if I lost that. He reached out for it, but was surprised when Kakashi pulled it away. I'm happy to return this back to you, but I have a couple of questions I'd like answered first, Kakashi said in a more serious tone. After he was sure the blonde understood, he continued, First off, let's start with the easier question. I assume Kitsune was the one who taught you Katan Jutsu? The boy was quiet as he nodded vigorously, anxious to get his kunai back. I want to make sure that he fully explains how dangerous that jutsu can be. As Naruto tilted his head to the side, it was evident the blonde didn't know what he was talking about. I'm sure Kitsune has told you there are multiple steps to that jutsu, correct? Another nod. Good, I'm sure that he was going to fully explain it to you, but you are my student now, and I want to make sure you know how dangerous that jutsu can be. He brought up his other hand and raised one finger. That technique is Kitsune's signature jutsu, and, even for Katan Jutsu, it is rather dangerous if it gets out of hand. The jutsu has 3 stages, with each improving on the last. It appears you already have the first stage down. It releases a steady stream of fire with a yellow and orange hue. What makes this jutsu special is that the flames linger as long as the caster is conscious, and can only be dispelled if he or she chooses to. He raised his second finger as he continued. The next stage is about increasing the heat and intensity of the jutsu. The jutsu changes from yellow to pure white as the heat is increased dramatically. At this stage, the flames can even be hot enough to melt steel. Just like the previous stage, the jutsu will not fade unless the caster wills it. The boy seemed excited as Kakashi lifted his third finger. Finally, the third stage, which is the most deadly of them all. This is why I am making sure you understand how dangerous that jutsu can be. The heat is turned up even more at this stage, turning the flames solid blue. What is incredibly deadly is what happens when the flames come in contact with something. While the first stage is about forming the shape and the second is about increasing the intensity, the third step is about changing the composition of the jutsu. I don't know the full details, but I do know that anything the flame touches practically liquefies on contact. The boy's eyes were wide in excitement at this. This can go for anything. Steel walls, masonry. He shot him a glare with his visible eye. People. The boy gulped as the realization hit him. He had used a jutsu that could do that on Kakashi-sensei. Thankfully, I am a jounin and that was only the first level of the technique, but imagine if you had tried to use that on someone who wasn't able to evade in time. Even if you were using the lower level of the jutsu, imagine hitting one of your teammates. You'd be panicking, making it harder for you to correctly form your chakra to dispel the jutsu. He didn't have to say it, but he could tell the boy got the message. Be careful and don't use it in a spar against his teammates. Now, moving on. The more prevalent question in my mind is this. Once again he held up the kunai. Where did you find this? Naruto gulped as he answered, I found it out in the woods around here a couple years ago. I saw the seal formula and I just couldn't help myself. I've been working on it ever since. Kakashi could not hide his shock. Are you saying that you learned Hiraishin all by yourself? The boy ate up the man's surprise. He puffed out his chest and said, "You bet your ass I did." Although there are still those drawbacks, he thought to himself with a wince. Kakashi was silent for a moment. Well, isn't that something else? Finally, he tossed the kunai back to the boy, who felt relief flood through his body as his prized possession came back to where it belonged. His relief quickly turned to shock as he watched Kakashi reach into his own pouch and pull out an identical kunai to the one in his hands. The boy's head swiveled back and forth between the two as if he couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. Where did you get that?" Naruto asked with a hint of awe, while his head began to overflow with questions. "Were you the one to develop the jutsu?" Kakashi laughed as he shook his head. "Sorry to burst your bubble, but no. My own sensei was actually the one who developed the jutsu. He gave me this kunai as a gift the day I became a jounin. I've always kept it with me as a reminder of him." Rubbing the handle one last time, he made up his mind as he offered it to the boy. "Take it. It seems like it will do more good with you than with me," Kakashi said, chuckling at Naruto's starstruck expression. Naruto couldn't stop himself from shaking as he slowly took the blade from the older man's hand. Are you sure, sensei?" His voice cracked. He couldn't help but run his fingers along the handle, feeling the grooves of the symbols etched into the wood. Kakashi shrugged. "It seems to me that you'll get more out of it than I ever have." Naruto was silent before lunging at the jounin and wrapping around him in a tight embrace. Kakashi was surprised but chuckled as he patted the blonde's hair. "Thank you," the blonde whispered, almost muffled by the jounin's flak jacket. "Don't mention it. Now, while I'm certainly impressed with how far you've gotten by yourself, I know from first-hand experience that those side effects aren't normal." The blonde slowly removed himself and seemed embarrassed as he wiped his nose before answering. "I'm trying to figure that out. The problem is that the effects vary in intensity each time I do it. I tested to see if distance or chakra usage made the reaction worse, but it has never been constant." Kakashi nodded as he began to turn back towards the village. He had a meeting after all. "Wait, Kakashi-sensei," the boy pleaded. "I have to know. Who was your sensei? Is he someone I'd know?" Kakashi chuckled as he glanced back over his shoulder. "You might have heard of him. After all, he was the one that placed that seal on your stomach." Kakashi stayed long enough to enjoy the look of wide-eyed realization flash across the boy's face, before he shushed away towards the Hokage's office. 2 hours later. "This is just getting silly. I don't understand why you allow him to get away with this, Hokage-sama," an irate Kurenai said as she and Asuma stood before the sandaime. "Let's just say he's paying his respects to someone in his own special way," the Hokage replied coyly. "What do you?" Kurenai was cut off as a knock at the door signaled that he had finally arrived. "Well, look who it is," Asuma said, rolling his eyes as Kakashi sauntered in. "Couldn't you have hurried up to tell us that you failed them? You know we can't leave until everyone's reports are in." Kakashi barely paid him any mind as he stood before the professor. "I'm happy to report that Team 7 passed with flying colors." Silence settled over the room. Kakashi couldn't help but be amused at the sight of Asuma's cigarette just barely hanging out of his mouth. "Did they now?" the Hokage asked with a knowing smile, folding his hands in front of his face. "What can I say? The kids have talent," Kakashi replied with a shrug, before turning his full attention to the Hokage. "I need to speak to you alone. Now." Ignoring the others in the room, he followed up with, "Without Anbu." Kurenai couldn't help but shoot him a worried look, but obediently turned and left the room after a nod from the Hokage. She and Asuma shot the pair one final glance as they followed the Anbu agents out the door, which shut behind them with soft thud. After a moment of silence, Kakashi turned to his right and said, "You too, Kitsune." The boy appeared behind the old man's shoulder, his body tense and protective. The Hokage spared him a glance and a knowing look. Reluctantly, the boy stood down and offered one last bow before following the others out of the room. The silence that settled over the room was deafening. It was another minute before Kakashi spoke up again. "So when were you going to tell me we had another yellow flash on our hands?" The old man chuckled as he palmed his pipe and produced a small flame from his finger to light it. I thought it would be entertaining to see your blind reaction. He paused and took a drag of his pipe before continuing. I'm honestly surprised he got a punch in. Kakashi eyed the glass ball behind the old man's desk as he rubbed his jaw. I was surprised, though he only landed it because of the shock value and the gravity seal. So, he really did discover it himself? The old man nodded, leaning back in his chair. I was just as surprised as you. It was about 2 years ago. I had known for a while he had been meddling with some secret project for some time, but when he came forward and showed me what it was, I was speechless. It was like watching Minato attempt the technique all over again. He softly smiled as a wave of nostalgia settled over him. He let the feelings reminisce for a few moments longer, before his expression took on a more serious look. However, I am concerned about the toll the jutsu is taking on his body. Kakashi nodded as the Hokage took another drag of his pipe. Minato had experienced some disorientation during the early stages of development, but afterwards his body adjusted to the feeling. The only time he experienced anything similar to what Naruto has felt was the first time he ever attempted it. That was before he adjusted Nidame's seal. If Tsunade hadn't been present. He was silent as the implication rolled over both of them. The Hokage rose from his chair with a groan and turned to look out of the glass window over the village. What do you think the issue could be? Kakashi asked as he walked around the desk and stood next to the older man. Who knows? We are talking about a situation where a child, a talented child granted, but nevertheless a child, is attempting to recreate an extremely difficult technique that has stumped seal masters for years. It could be anything from the boy simply not performing the jutsu correctly to something in the seal fighting against him. Since he's come this far, why not let him look over the jutsu's source formula? The thought had crossed my mind, but we were never able to locate a detailed copy of Minato's version of the formula. To be honest, it is likely still locked away in the Namikaze estate. The place is blocked off by powerful blood seals, and Jiraiya refuses to help do anything about them, leaving the only way in to be Naruto, Kakashi finished. Correct, and that would raise some difficult questions that the boy is not ready for. It is far too early. Besides, he has come this far on his own. Let's see if the boy is able to master it by himself. The more he experiments, the better understanding he will gain from it. The Hokage sighed, then turned his gaze towards the west side of the village. Now I think we've discussed Naruto enough for one night. I'm curious to hear about your other 2 students as well. Kakashi closed his eyes. Sasuke performed just as you'd expect from the Uchiha. Powerful fire techniques and superb taijutsu skills. I'd be willing to say that he is already rank in skill, but... But? The Hokage asked with a raised eyebrow. But he needs to work on social skills. I can already see traces of a severe inferiority and superiority complex in the works. At least he sees his teammates as people he can stand. I intend to keep a close eye on that, and make sure it doesn't develop into something ugly. The Hokage nodded. And what about little Hinata? Kakashi rubbed his head. Honestly, I didn't get a good look at Hinata's skill level. I can only assume that she is competent in her clan's taijutsu. She was the only one who saw through the meaning of the test and was preoccupied with aiding her teammates the entire time. I'd appreciate it if you could point me in the direction of some beginner medical jutsu. She has a knack for it. Coupled with her, I see quite the surgeon in our future. The Hokage nodded as he soaked this in. She may end up needing more of your attention than the boys will. She's got a lot of trouble already piled at her feet. Kakashi warily stared at the old man. As her teacher, you are entitled to certain information. This is a secret to be kept between Hayashi Hyuga and us. About 2 years ago, there was an incident beneath the clan's library. Said Hyuga unceremoniously flopped onto her bed, exhausted from the day's events. She had just finished talking with her father. His eyes had flashed when he heard the names of her teammates, and she could have sworn she had seen him sharply glance at a photo on his desk. Even after that display, he seemed pleased with the results of her report. Of course, she had left out the part of how she had been tied to the pole. She could only imagine the lecture and shame she would receive if he heard about that. She shifted her head into a more comfortable position, and was met by the small scroll sitting on her nightstand. She glared at the parchment until she noticed that something was different. Just like its inside, the outside had always remained blank, but now, there was a kanji for one written in black ink. She nervously took the scroll into her hand. She took a deep breath before slowly opening it. The once blank pages were now partly filled. She gazed across the title that read, The Tale of the Rabbit Goddess, Part 1. Thanks for watching, Shinobi Squad. If you enjoyed this What If, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next twist. Drop your theories in the comments, I'm always reading. Want more Naruto heat? Check out the other videos on the channel. Stay sharp, stay awesome, and remember even shadow clones need love. Peace out.